Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
This is Malcolm Robinson and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for that intro, Malcolm. Right, I've got some calls out today. One's for Nigel Wright in Lancaster, Lancashire, UK. Second one is for Sherry Ann McGraw, Charleston, West Virginia, USA, and Jay Matthews, Manchester, UK. That's the three for today. Right, now, my guest today is a man named Tom Whitmore, and he's actually been a long-time MUFON board member. Tom has been in San Antonio, Texas residence in 1984. He's originally from Tulsa. Tom graduated with a degree in business administration from Portland State University and has a career in the financial industry since the 1970s. He has been employed as a financial analyst with a local firm in San Antonio and holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation from the CFA Institute. He is an accomplished guitarist and has a daughter who is a kindergarten teacher. Tom was invited to join the MUFON board in 1994 and has experienced the organisation's progress through the successive administrations of Walt Andrus, John Schlussler, I think that says, James Carrion, Clifford Clift, Dave McDonald, Jan Harson. He serves as treasurer and focuses on long-term and strategic issues for the organisation. Tom has been fascinated by military and intelligence agencies interactions and with the UFO public. He'll be undertaking a research study of the history of the MJ12 affair and intends to eventually publish his findings. He looks forward to participating in discussions on the MJ12 topic, which, as some listeners will know, we dealt with a couple of weeks ago after the sad loss of Stanton Friedman. He'll be giving local presentations to local UFO groups and being a guest on internet talk shows and podcasts such as this one. Well, I think I'll just introduce Tom now. And hello, Tom. Are you there?
Yes, David, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad.
I've been looking forward to talking to you, and it's once again, I'll say on here, I apologise for the delay. As you know, we did lose Stanton Friedman a couple of weeks ago, and I had to do a couple of kind of tribute shows, if you will, if I call them that. Is this your first UK based show?
Yes, it is, and it's very exciting.
Welcome to the UK.
Thank you, and I hope to come over and visit sometime.
Yeah, sure. I hope you do. I mean, I hope this will be the first of many, but UK shows too. As you know, this network goes out all across the US anyway, so it's not as if it's just UK based, you know. But
I've been in the process of retiring from my regular employment, so I'm going to have time to travel, and I want to get over to the UK one of these days, not too long from now.
Good. I hope you do. I mean, if you come down to, you've heard of the Rendlesham Forest incident from 1980.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I live fairly near Rendlesham Forest, and I know quite a bit about it. So if you ever come down to this way, then maybe we can meet up.
Well, actually, I had a conversation with Colonel Halt.
He's a good friend of mine.
A few weeks ago when I was at the Edinburgh UFO Festival in Edinburgh, Texas. He was there. So that was interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I don't know if you know, but I'm planning a conference for Colonel Holt in September. He's coming over again, and he'll be staying here and everything, and he'll be over for about a week. So if you could make it in September, it'd be great. That's probably pushing it a bit.
Well, unfortunately, I can't be everywhere at once.
No. Anyway, Tom, let's get into where would you like to start? You'll tell us about your MUFON connections and.
Well, I'm normally asked this question: how did I get into UFOs? But I'm 66 years old, and I was born in 1953. So I grew up as a Cold War baby, a Cold War era person, and constantly hearing about the possibilities of a nuclear war and the space program. And as you know, during that era, there were movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still, and we had The Twilight Zone, and I was reading Tom Swift books growing up. And UFOs were very much in the mainstream media in the 50s and 60s. So I grew up with that, and I wasn't actively involved. I had read several books by Donald Kehoe, Flying Saucers, Serious Business type thing in my younger years. But in the 1980s, after reading history books, stacks of history books for many years, I got interested in the subject of espionage and counterintelligence and psychological warfare. And in the very late 80s, early 90s, I ran across a UFO magazine on the street, and I bought it and read it, and then I started looking into the field some more, and I got involved in MUFON. And at that time, the MJ-12 controversy was raging in the early 90s. And in looking at that, I realized that there had been a merger between counterintelligence and psychological warfare and the UFO problem. So this is what really truly intrigues me. Meanwhile, I had gotten involved in MUFON. I had bought the Field Investigator's Manual, studied it, passed the Field Investigator's exam, became a field investigator, investigated some cases. I became a state section director, and after a while, now MUFON at that time was headquartered in Seguin, Texas, which is just a few miles from San Antonio, and it was being run by Walt Andrus, and Walt Andrus courteously gave me the opportunity to come on the board of MUFON in the 1994 era. In fact, it was during the time of the symposium, MUFON Symposium in Austin, Texas, and I've been on the board ever since.
Right, interesting. Yeah. Now, you've sort of thrown me a little bit there. Now, so let's go back to the Roswell. You mentioned what about the Roswell? Obviously, the MJ-12 documents arrived via the Roswell incident. What is your feelings on that? Do you feel through any MUFON investigations that there actually was an alien craft that crashed?
I think that it's a distinct possibility, and I think that many historians will tell us, David, that history is really a matter of probabilities. And I think that we can ask ourselves, how probable is it that a craft crashed and there were bodies and this was all anomalous? And I would say that the probability is pretty high. I've read, much of the Roswell literature and kept up with the Roswell controversy. The latest thing I've read is Roswell in the 21st Century by Kevin Randall, and Kevin Randall is a very conservative UFO investigator. He has wonderful investigative skills. He tracks down people and gets as close as he can to the heart of the information. And in reading Roswell in the 21st Century, which I think is the latest on the subject, there's enough there to convince me Now, maybe someone who's more skeptical, they may have more trouble with it. But after all the years of the stories and the testimonies, the rumors, the leaks, from a number of different sources, not just from the Roswell area, but from military bases, from retired military people, et cetera, there's enough to convince me that it's highly probable that something like that has happened.
I mean, how about the Colonel Corso story? Do you go along with that, or because I know he worked in the Pentagon, didn't he, after his time in the Air Force? And you've got to give his story some credence for that issue alone.
Yeah, he had. I think that Colonel Corso, or Lieutenant Colonel Corso, I believe, had a pretty solid career in the Army and in the government. He claims that he worked for General Trudeau and that he did come across some Roswell material that he claims he passed on to private industry. I think that much of it, considering the possibilities of the Roswell effects, I think that much of it is believable. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I have heard that the really juicy information is his own diary, his own personal papers, which I haven't seen, and as far as I know, have not been published. It would be nice if we could see that. Now, the Roswell book that came out, with his name, I think was geared, toward commercial appeal. And it's possible there's some things in there that are either not relevant or not true or have been exaggerated. But I think there's, again, there's a distinct possibility that some of his activities have been related to Roswell. Yeah,
I think he may have well been fed some dud information, which ended up in the book itself. But I think you've got, as I say, I think you've got to give him some credence for the fact that he was working in the Pentagon, unless it was all a misinformation, a disinformation tactic.
Yeah.
But,
well, there's always that possibility.
Yeah, but the fact that things like lasers and fibre optics and ICs and all sorts of chips and transistors and things that came out of that, they all did seem to appear quite around that sort of same time, didn't they? And there's no real hard. I can't find any hard connections between where lasers actually first started materialising. They seem to come out of nowhere.
Yeah. And I'm not an authority on the history of technology in the 20th century.
No.
But it's simply amazing in terms of the microprocessors, that the kind of progress that's been made and the number of processors that can be imprinted onto a chip is just absolutely amazing.
It's phenomenal, yeah. I mean, I actually got my working career was in the electronics industry, and when I first started, we had normal valves and things, plugging them in like the late 60s. And right up until when I was leaving, I mean, you couldn't see the things on a pinhead, so the amazing transformation that went through while I was working in the industry was, it was fascinating and amazing, Yeah,
it is. And who knows? I mean, sometimes all you have to do is get an idea across to some of these people and they can run with it.
Yeah, sure. So your actual thoughts on the MJ12 documents, do you think they're all genuine, or do you think there's some fake ones thrown in there to sort of muddy the waters a bit? Because that's my thoughts. I think in order to sort of discredit them, they've had some fake ones thrown in there.
Yeah, well, my area of interest, David, is what I call the history of the MJ12 affair. And I'm drawing a distinction in that I'm looking at the history of the actual activities that were involved in the development of the MJ12 affair, and that being the people that were involved and the events that occurred and the things, the ideas and the claims that were made. And I believe this has been going on since the early 80s up to the present day. And, we can outline a history of the MJ12 affair with the appearance of the original MJ12 documents in the 1980s, connected with Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray and your gentleman from England there, I can't remember his name right now, but above top secret, Timothy Good.
Oh, Tim Good, yeah.
Yeah, the release of those documents in the 1980s. And then we had, now, there are several things that I'm including in the MJ-12 affair, those things being, for example, the appearance of Bob Lazar. And then in the 90s, we had the documents that are associated with Timothy Cooper. And this is a much higher volume of material, of pages, that have been related to Timothy Cooper's activities. And in the 90s, we had, of course, the alien autopsy film. Mm-hmm. And also in the 90s and the 2000s, we had these claims from this person by the name of Dan Burrish. And then in the 2000s, we had the Serpo affair, the Serpo material that has come out. And then up to the present, and more Dan Burrish material. And up to the present time, we've had this ultra top secret MJ-12 document appear on the internet. And then almost within the last few weeks, we've had this document allegedly associated with Eric Davis on the Admiral Wilson document, and also with Kit Green on the alien autopsy issue. So, in my opinion, the MJ-12 affair has occurred almost up to this month.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say about the alien autopsy, when I actually know the man who did the alien autopsy, Spiros Polaris, and that all this thing about the alien autopsy being genuine, there are people out there that still think it's genuine. It's really, I know for a fact it's really a fake film. You know, it's well, I don't know what sort of whatever paperwork that's come out. Whether there's another real alien autopsy is another matter. But the one that's actually out there that was on film was actually a fake one. But yeah.
Yeah, and at the moment, David, I think in terms of the alien autopsy film, we have mass confusion because there has been this document that has come out that has been leaked on the internet that was between Eric Davis and Dr. Kit Green. And Dr. Kit Green, in these series of emails, it was communicated, Dr. Green had said that he had been briefed on these alien dissections. So this started this whole ball rolling a few weeks ago, with re-examining the alien autopsy film. Now, I'm not sitting here claiming that the film that we've all seen, that was marketed is genuine. I'm not claiming that at all. What my question is, what about the original film that Mr. Santilli claimed that had or has? Does that still?
Well,
is it his possession? This is the question I'd like to have answered.
Yeah, I've got my opinion on that, and I don't think there is one.
Well, there may not.
From what I gather, Spiros Polaris has said that he's inviting Santilli to produce it, and he says he never will because he hasn't got one.
Well, and if you think about it, David, if you had something like that, if I was doing that, for one thing, I would, if I did a reconstruction of the event, a reenactment, I would identify it as such to begin with. Secondly, I would state that there is original film, and I would hold that in some kind of custody or escrow so that it could be verified. Okay? And those are logical things that you would think would be done under circumstances such as that.
Yeah, when Spiros produced that film, he did it as kind of a joke, in fact. And it got out of hand. He didn't actually realise that, Santilli was actually spreading it all around the world and making a lot of money out of it. He actually realised himself that when somebody told him it was actually on the television that he went, what? As if, it was supposed to have been just a joke that got out of hand, in actual fact.
Well, I've got an open mind, and I requested a copy of Philip Mantle's book, and he very courteously sent it to me at no charge.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I know that he spent years researching that.
Absolutely.
My intention, David, is to look at the history of this whole affair, you know, from the 80s to the present, and try to get as much factual information as I can, and let the chips fall where they may.
Sure.
Now, you asked me what is my opinion of the original MJ12 documents, and there are several theories I think that we can associate that with that. One is an out-and-out hoax, either by Bill Moore and company or by some unknown party. Another possibility is that and this is becoming increasingly apparent in recent discussions, but there are factions within the Department of Defense. There's a faction, apparently, that is in favor of greater disclosure of information to the public, and there's a faction that is against disclosure.
Yeah.
It's one possibility is that maybe some kind of compromise had been reached, and the compromise was that information that would be released to the public, that it would be released in such a way that it would enable plausible deniability and not be able to be traced back to its source. So that's one theory about the MJ12 related material. Another theory I have is the more that I look at the so-called aviary, that and again, this is becoming a more popular notion in just following the general discussion on the internet and on Twitter, is that this aviary and certain key people within the aviary, such as Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, maybe Eric Davis, John Alexander, et cetera, that they have moved through several iterations over the years. This aviary was a loose group in the 80s, and some of these people migrated to Joe Firmage and to Mr. Bigelow's NIDS and Mr. Bigelow's BASS. And now here we are today. Some of these same people have migrated to the Stars Academy. So I'm looking into the possibility that the MJ12 documents may have originated somewhere within the aviary, not necessarily from Bill Moore. So that's another possibility.
Did you ever speak to Stanton about the MJ12 documents at all?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. I was doing a lot of research at the time on the internet, and this was several years ago. And I had some pretty pointed, kind of hard questions that I wanted to ask Stan Friedman, and I had the opportunity to sit down with him at a symposium. This was several years ago. Twice I sat down with him, or I talked with him eye to eye, man to man at a cocktail party, and we sat down at breakfast. And I asked several very pointed questions to him, and he just shrugged his shoulders and he said, "It doesn't make any difference because the MJ12 documents are real." Those are the answers that I got.
Yes.
So, yeah, everyone's pretty familiar.
So in actual fact, his mind was made up.
That's right.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Let's move on to the Bob Lazar. What is your opinion of him? Now, I'll just give you my quick opinion. For about 20 years, I actually believed Bob Lazar's story. I'm afraid over the last year or so, I've sort of started sitting on the fence about it, and now I've gone on the side that I don't really believe him. How do you feel about that?
I just don't know what to think really, David, because his educational credentials have not been verified, as we all know, and you would think that would be one of the first things that he would trot out, to prove his case. He apparently did work at Los Alamos in some capacity, all right? Perhaps as a technician, perhaps as an outside contractor. I don't know, because I haven't had a chance, to investigate that in any depth. I'm just going by what I'm seeing in the public literature and in the public discussions. Whether he was actually in Area 51 or S4, as they say, I just don't know. But But I will say this, his story has not changed over the years. And he has seemed to be very reluctant to talk, to go public, even though, and he has the appearance of people, in order to get him to go public with anything, they have to drag it out of him. They have to drag him into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just before he died, actually, Stanton Friedman had a meeting with Bob Lazar, didn't he? I think it was a televised one, and he seemed to think that Bob Lazar was a fraud.
Well, and Eric Davis has said that Bob Lazar is a fraud. But here's the possibility. Bob Lazar claims that, he said that he had built a jet car when he was working in Los Alamos, and that an article had been written about that jet car in the Los Alamos newspaper, and that Lazar claims that he ran into Edward Teller reading that article, and they got into a conversation. And that later on, when Lazar, and these are his claims, that when Lazar decided to get back into science, whatever that means, that he got in touch with Dr. Teller. Now, you would think that if you were just Joe Blow off the street, you would not be called by EG&G into an interview to go to work at what, if true, is got to be the most classified program in the world, okay? But if you knew Edward Teller, and if Edward Teller picked up the phone and said, I've got somebody for you to work there, I think you wouldn't have any trouble at all getting in, okay? And I will say that, but I don't know.
Sure, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, like, all these questions are bubbling around at the moment, and I don't think we're going to get the answers to any of them, are we? Because, as I say, I believed Bob Lazar's story for about 20 years or so, and, for around about 20 years, and I saw the film actually a few days ago, that he's got out, and it didn't convince me at all, to be honest, even though I'd been on the Bob Lazar side of the fence for so many years. There you go. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? See what materialises.
Well, David, that's the thing about the UFO field is, I think it really requires a lot of patience. It just requires a lot of patience because in all the 70 years since this all began in 1947, the modern era, we have never received firm confirmation from authorities in society. Now, we that follow the UFO field, like myself and other people in the field, we're quite sure that something's going on. But we've never received official confirmation. So that leaves us in limbo, and all we can do is have patience and keep studying, keep learning. But especially when we get into these documents and leaked information and DOD-related stuff, it just turns into a wilderness of mirrors.
Yeah. It's like I've said a couple of times, it seems to me they're releasing a lot of stuff, and it's probably all out there, but you've got to find it in amongst the woods, haven't you? You've got a tree that you've got to find within the woods. That's, that's the way it seems to me, especially with the reports they've released over here in the UK. There's been a deluge of UFO reports being released, and if you go through, which is tens of thousands of pages, and you really need to go through, well, I haven't personally gone through them all, but I know people like Nick Pope and that have gone through much of it, and there are treasures within those papers that do point to something, that something has happened at some point, that there are real genuine reports out there. I certainly believe them, and I know, I've seen a UFO myself in '67, so I do know they're out there. Have you had your own experience at all?
I haven't. I have not. And after learning what I learned in the 90s about these abductions, I really started thinking, David, that I don't want to see a UFO.
Oh, yeah, true. I wasn't abducted or anything. I just saw an orange oval object going across the night sky, pulsating. It wasn't a bright light. It was like an incandescent light. But I was watching it for a good 15 minutes or so, and it wasn't an aircraft. I'm talking about 1967, I believe it was. And it was a large oval object, and I actually went out and got a book. I looked for a book about oval objects, and I was amazed to find that there's loads of oval objects seen all over the world, in actual fact. But
yeah. And there's no shortage of sightings in the UK, that's for sure.
Yeah, and orange seems to be a particular colour that some of them appears to be. You know, even quite similar to the Colonel Holt experience.
But you guys are over there in NATO land, and I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with it. What
do you mean? What's secret weapons?
Yeah, I mean, just
that's always a possibility. I mean, it's it's. I mean, what this oval object was, it certainly wasn't a normal aircraft. Whether it was some sort of a secret aircraft, I suppose that's always a possibility.
Sure. So, David, the thing that's bothering me right now about these latest document releases, two documents in particular, the Admiral Wilson document and the Kit Green document, is that some people are trying to jump in and immediately say that they're the most important documents in UFO history, and then other people are jumping in and trying to say, oh, they're fake. They find this or that red flag or this or that inconsistency. And I'd like to see more of what I would term a methodical approach to analyzing these problems. For example, the first question you have is provenance. Where did the document originate and how? Secondly, there's the question of chain of custody. Who has had the document? How is the item passed from one party to another? Now, in the case of the Admiral Wilson document, the chain of custody is very interesting, and we don't have a complete chain of custody yet. Also, I think we need to be looking at the timeline. What has occurred by whom, when, and we want to look at the disposition. Where is the document now? Does it still exist? Has it been destroyed? Is it in someone's files? I think these are questions that we need to be asking and looking at, and I'd like to see people investigating this on an objective, rational basis, and then we can summarize what it is that we know and what it is that we don't know. For example, in the Admiral Wilson document, it's not outlandish to think that the document, if it's true, and it hasn't been denied by Eric Davis, but that it originated with Eric Davis. He possibly made copies and sent them to friends of his in NIDS, one of those people being Edgar Mitchell. A copy of that document was entered in Edgar Mitchell's files. Someone or some group, we don't know who, was able to take possession of Edgar Mitchell's files. Now, somewhere between there and the gentleman in Australia received that document or documents from some party that he says was at a space conference. Okay, and we don't know who these parties are in between. So we have a reasonable idea of a chain of custody on this because we know that Grant Cameron ended up, he says that he got a copy of the document and then it was leaked on the internet and we don't know who leaked it. So we have a partial chain of custody on this. And it's okay to say that we know certain things and we don't know certain things, other things, and that those still are subject to investigation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very muddy, it's a very muddy river out there at the moment, isn't it? But, anyway, I think I'll do a quick, hello, welcome to the, Paranormal UK radio network. We're listening to Tom Whitmore. And we've been covering the MJ12 documents, etc. And, just in case you wonder where you were. Anyway, Tom, I know we jumped straight in, and so you originally became interested in UFOs, but you hadn't actually seen any. Do you actually believe in them yourself?
Yes, most definitely.
So you've seen enough evidence that makes you believe in them.
Oh yes, very definitely. I can't say for sure where they originate or what the ultimate nature of it is. I don't know. And we've all heard all the theories, from extraterrestrial to interdimensional to ultra-terrestrial to time travelers, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, it could be any and all of those, couldn't it? You know, it's.
Yes, it could, but there's definitely a real UFO phenomenon. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Yeah. Have you got some sort of a drive mechanism that keeps you going in your interests in this? You know what I'm saying? Is there an internal thing that wants you to get to the truth in this, like like many of us try to do?
You mean, is there something that's...
Yeah, what drives you? What drives you? Is it the passion of it, or just the interest, or both?
Well, I think ultimately people are interested in the UFO problem, in the phenomenon, because it ultimately creates wonder. And what can be more wonderful, so to speak, than to examine the possibility of this phenomenon originating possibly extraterrestrial or whatever origin it has. There's that element of wonder. Secondly, I've been in the UFO field long enough to know that this is a long-term problem. There are no quick solutions. And I've developed a sense of patience in this field, and I believe that to be successful in the long term in studying UFOs consistently, that we must have a tolerance for ambiguity. What can be more ambiguous than the UFO topic, okay? Thirdly, I'm fascinated by the possibility that the government intelligence agencies take an interest in the UFO groups. And we've seen evidence of this. And if there are counterintelligence activities occurring in relationship to the UFO groups and UFO individuals, I want to learn all I can about it. That keeps me going.
Sure. And I guess that's how you see your role in ufology, to tell as many people as you can and write about it, and hope you want to get this book out and basically get your side of things out, and hopefully back up your beliefs in ufology, like we all do.
My point of
yeah.
My point of view, I mean, I want to write. It's either going to be a report or a self-published book, or maybe even a commercially published book if anyone will print it. But the basic theme is MJ12, a reappraisal, because I think enough time has transpired. This has been going on 40 years that we can really develop some historical perspective in this. And I think with a re-examination of the facts, of the people involved, of the documents, of the activities that occurred, I want to dig into this as far as I can, David, and hopefully turn up new ground, turn up new material. And in all of that, I think we can have a reappraisal of the MJ12 affair. And again, like I said, I think, we'll let the chips fall where they may.
Sure, yeah. Well, why do you think that there's so many divides regarding the subjects of UFOs and their implications for humanity, sort of thing? There seems to be a real hard division about people that, if you're a non-believer, the non-believers seem to think that all the UFO believers are nuts, basically, and the UFO believers think that all the ones that don't believe it, they think they're nuts. It's kind of a big division, isn't it?
Well, I know it's affected me because when I know that establishment science won't address the UFO problem, that in itself makes me skeptical of establishment science.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully not going too far with that notion, but establishment science is made up of human beings, and human beings aren't perfect, and they have their issues. And in establishment science, you have dogma, you have doctrine, you have things that you can't question. They've been asserted to the point that if you take a different approach, maybe you don't get tenure at your university, maybe you don't get along with your coworkers, maybe you don't get that promotion, maybe you get fired. So there are people that fall into line to whatever the establishment science doctrines and dogmas are, and they don't step out of line. And that's why you have this whole notion of an invisible college. Now, there are scientists who are interested in the UFO problem, but they've got to study it underground, so to speak. There's an underground, and how many scientists, I don't know. But I think people in general are a little more open-minded than maybe I think, because of the experiences I've had in the UFO field. But if they're studying it, they're doing it privately and quietly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that if they report a UFO, they're being classed as an attention seeker or a hoaxer, or or mentally ill even. And I think I think a lot of that is actually being sort of pushed aside now, and people are actually accepting more, aren't they? I believe, anyway. Or there's still, I mean, I know there are still people out there that think people that you believe in UFOs are all nuts, but I mean, when you think about it, I mean, with all those stars that are out there, there's got to be other civilizations out there, and probably millions of years in advance of what we are. So, to my way of thinking, there's no reason why they can't be coming here, or or we've got the interdimensional factor also. So,
well, hopefully it's getting better. There had been a real effort by authorities to really clamp down on this.
Yeah.
Airline pilots have been reluctant to report anything. The military people have been reluctant to report anything. It doesn't help your career. I don't know if that's because the military people don't want to deal with it. They see it as an extraneous issue that's outside of their real job, which is protecting national security, or if there is some oversight and direction, to avoid this whole subject.
Well, as you know, I was going to say, as you know, you said as you know, because Colonel Holt, this whole thing affected his career in the Air Force. And it was something he never wanted to come out, but it came out, and he was stuck with it for the rest of his life. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sticks to you, right?
Yeah, that was quite a good example about how they probably really don't want that story coming out. He said I know he said to me a couple of times, he said it was one of those things that I'd have rather didn't come out.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
What are your thoughts on the disclosure movement? Do you think we'll ever get real disclosure? Real disclosure. I know that all these things coming out, and we're not sure if they're true or not. Like the president coming out and say, right, I've got an announcement to make. We are not alone, or something like that. Do you think that'll ever happen?
I do not. And now, and I've said this before, but the main question is if there has been one or more saucers recovered, and if there have been alien bodies, if there is anything to that, then I don't think there's going to be any real disclosure about it. And the reason why is because if it is true, it's been kept under wraps for 70 years, and there has been a lot of lying going on. And if this ever was outed or became public, there are some people that are going to have to answer some very hard questions, and they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. And assuming it is true, if it is true, the people that are in control of this information, they have no incentive to disclose it. They have nothing to gain, because all it's going to do is cause problems for them. And that's why I don't think there's going to be any out and out disclosure. Now, I do think currently, just recently in the last 12 months, we've been in a process of getting what I call soft confirmation. And soft confirmation is where it has been acceptable to discuss UFOs publicly by the mainstream media, and even by some of the military and congressional authorities. So there's been an inkling of some admission that maybe there's something to the UFO problem. Okay?
Yeah.
But that's not what I call hard confirmation. Hard confirmation is when they roll out the B-2 bomber and they have a ceremony and they have speeches, and there's no doubt that there is a B-2 bomber. Okay? And hard confirmation in UFOs would be the Secretary of Defense coming out and having a press conference and saying, this UFO problem is real. We have tapes. We have radar records. We have films, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's going to happen. And for the average person who doesn't believe in the UFO problem and doesn't know anything about it, it would be very hard to convince them that there are real crashed UFOs and there are real alien bodies. It's almost like you'd have to put them on display in the Smithsonian or on the Washington D.C. Mall and let the masses file past, file past the saucers and the bodies. That's the kind of hard confirmation that is really necessary for this UFO problem to really truly be accepted by the media, by academia, by government, by military, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, there'll certainly be some awkward questions being asked about why have you covered it up and lied to us over all these years. Yeah, certainly.
And so what are we left with? We have what I think in the intelligence community and even in the financial world is known as a mosaic. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. We have certain pieces that we can be fairly sure are indicators of reality, and we also have a lot of missing information. So I think as UFO researchers and investigators, we're reduced to having to put together a mosaic, and it requires a lot of patience and it requires a tolerance for ambiguity.
Yeah, sure. Have you got any advice for anyone that might be considering their own UFO investigations or research in the field? I mean, what would you say to them, anyone that wants to start out investigating?
Well, I would give this advice to new investigators. You want, and I realize I'm plugging MUFON here, but it's truth that the best, most reliable, most thorough, most methodical manual on field investigation is the MUFON Field Investigator's Manual. Okay. Now, I've got a copy of it here in my house. It is excellent. So I would advise, and this has been put together, David, over many years. MUFON has been since 50 years. So we do know a thing or two about UFO investigation. And I would advise anyone that wants to be an investigator to join MUFON and get a copy of the Field Investigator's Manual and pass the exam. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You can go to the library or you can go to Amazon or go on the internet, and there are books on UFO investigations, on field investigations, and you can put together your own little program. Now, there are two ways to go about it. You can join MUFON and get into the MUFON network, and there are local groups. They're called state sections, and we have state directors, and you can get into the MUFON system and hopefully be assigned cases and start doing cases that way. The other way to do it is, like I said, go to the library or get books from Amazon and study field investigator training, and then start investigating sightings and build your own case file privately, okay?
Sure, yeah.
Now, I would advise anyone getting into field investigation to not spend a lot of money on equipment, like cameras and Geiger counters and all this stuff. The reason why I say that is because, and here's a truism in UFO field investigations, David. The vast, vast majority of information that you're going to get in conducting field investigations is witness testimony.
Sure, yeah.
You will get very little physical evidence. Now, I'm not saying you will never get any. I mean, it's possible, somebody could have something happen and all of a sudden you have physical evidence, and that's fine, okay? But in the vast majority of cases, all you have is witness testimony. So you want to develop skills in interviewing the witness. And in my humble opinion, the most important thing to do in interviewing the witness is asking the right kinds of questions and then sitting back and listening and let the witness talk, okay, without providing leading questions, et cetera, and in interviewing the witness and then documenting that as best you can.
Exactly, yeah. And even in this day and age of everyone's got mobile phones, even now we're not sure what we're looking at on the internet, are we? With all these UFOs, is that true or is it not true? You know, there's so many fakes out there that you can't rely on any film footage that you might be shown. I think that's one. Well, I think that's an important factor that needs to be pointed out to everyone going out there, that there's a lot of fakes out there.
There's a lot of fakes, and you can run your own little test. Next time you see a jet airplane flying by, you know, say in a landing pattern, but it's fairly far away, take out your phone and take a picture, and then look at it later and see how much, you know, how clear does the plane look to you? Can you clearly identify it as an airplane? I bet you in a lot of instances that you'd have a hard time even identifying it as an airplane, much less as a UFO.
Sure, yeah. Or quite often you catch birds, don't you? They look like even like a disc sometimes if they're in flight.
And, you know, people say, well, there are all these cell phones, you know, why doesn't somebody have a good photograph of UFO? I mean, that's true, there are a lot of cell phones, but, you know, I'll ride my bike on these greenways, these parks in town, and there will be deer or there will be birds, etc., and I'll pull out my phone. By the time I get my phone out and I'm ready to press the button, the deer's run off.
Yeah,
okay?
they're gone, yeah. I know. Yeah.
That's the way, I mean, UFOs are even worse, and that's a big problem, David, because people say, well, there's not enough scientific investigation being done in the UFO field. But there's a real problem because you don't know when you're going to see a UFO. You don't know where you're going to see a UFO. You don't know under what circumstances you're going to see a UFO. I mean, in order to even start to do science, for one thing, you have to have something you can measure. And secondly, you have to have some control of the conditions over which you can study it. And neither of those conditions exist in the UFO problem.
Exactly, yeah. What are your feelings on abductees? You know, like the Travis Walton case, for instance, as a good example.
Yeah, Travis Walton case does not fit the kind of standard mold of the UFO abduction scenario, but the Travis Walton case is fascinating, and the things that occurred have been extremely interesting. I believe that it's had a profound effect on Travis Walton's life, and to this day he's still telling that story. I don't have any trouble believing him, even though, again, you know, do we ever really know whether something actually happened or is true? Now, with the UFO abductions, there have been so many reports and so many claims by individuals, and their lives have been affected. They've been affected psychologically, and they've been affected physically. There's been so much of that I don't think you can write off the UFO abduction problem. And that now there are some claims, there are some notions that maybe there's some kind of nefarious military government mind control activities going on. You know, it's certainly a possibility. But overall, I'm convinced that some kind of abduction phenomenon is occurring, merely because of the sheer number of reports that have come in.
Sure, yeah. What about, I mean, I actually believe Travis Walton's story. I've met him a couple of times, and I think he's very convincing. He's an absolute gentleman, and I just don't see him as a liar. You know, he just doesn't come over as a liar. You know, I suppose we can all be open to be taken in. I know I've been taken in a few times, but personally, I believe him anyway. I mean, the fact that he went missing for 4 days is one of the factors. I mean, where would he have gone for 4 days? You know, and these friends were accused of murder. So,
well, and you know, quote unquote typical abductee experience is something that has developed into occurring at night, and whatever happens, the person, if they ever left their bedroom, they're returned that same night, and they wake up with strange sensations, so on and so forth. But in Travis Walton's case, assuming that the case that's been recounted is true as told, he was physically missing for that time period. That doesn't fit the mold. But at the same time, it's extremely interesting, and especially with his recounting being in some kind of underground facility, and that's extremely interesting.
Yeah, I think his theory is that they may well have been trying to save his life because he got too close to the craft, and it may well have affected him in some way.
Well, that could explain why his story doesn't really fit the average, the average narrative.
Yeah. What about you hear of people with implants? What's your opinion of that?
Well, again, it's just report after report after report, and it's frustrating because I don't know if there have ever actually been more than just one or two implants that have actually been retrieved and analyzed. I don't know of many cases where they have been, so that's a concern. But at the same time, you hear these stories of the implants physically moving. When people try to remove them, there are these cases of the implanted pregnancy syndrome, and then the fetus goes away, and the doctor just shrugs his shoulders. Women reporting these pregnancies to doctors, and the doctor's not believing them because it doesn't fit their paradigm. So they're in terms of getting to any real facts about it, it's very problematic for us civilian amateur type investigators. But there have been just far too many reports of implants and suspected implants for it to just be ignored.
Sure, yeah. And you do seem to find that most people that say they've got implants or they think they've got implants don't want them removed, do they? Because they think it may well affect something to do with their own physical body. I do actually know a couple of people that say they've got implants, and I don't disbelieve them. In fact, a friend of mine, he was just telling me the other day, Philip Kinsella, he's actually had it medically examined, and actually the doctor said, have you been abducted by aliens? Because it was actually behind his ear, and it's actually got like a crystalline stuff on it. So it's pretty weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And I think some people want them removed, and maybe some others don't. Maybe they think it's doing them some good. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we're coming towards it. And have you got, how many radio shows have you done so far in the States? You've done quite a few recently, I believe, haven't you?
Well, there's one radio program I've been on 3 times since the beginning of the year. And I've also been on, 3 others. So I think this'll be, 3, 4. So this may be the 5th one that I've been on this year.
Yeah, you're a busy man.
And I'm enjoying it immensely.
It's good.
And I appreciate having me on.
Oh, no, it's been great having you on. In actual fact, what I'll do, I'll have a little search and I'll put links to those other shows onto, because I've got the Paranormal Dimensions page on Facebook, if anyone wants to come and find it. I'll put some links on there to, Tom's other shows and interviews he's done. And if you want to send me anything, Tom, that might be of interest, I can put on the page, then you'd be most welcome. If you had your book out, I could advertise your book for you, but it's not out yet, so I can't do that for you.
Not quite there yet.
But I say, if you've got any other papers or notes and things you'd like me to put up, I can do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll do that. I've been meaning to assemble the links to all those anyway, so I'll send them to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Everyone, it's been great talking to you. Anyway, I think we're going to have to wind it up there because I know they're a bit more flexible now with this show, but they still want to make it to around about an hour. I mean, we had to do it just under an hour before, but we're sort of they're a little bit more flexible now because it goes out in a different format, so. But anyway, Tom, It's been fantastic talking to you, and don't forget, keep in touch. You know where I am now, and I certainly will be getting back to you and find out how you're getting on and everything, because I understand you're moving at the moment, or trying to move.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. My intention is to move to Washington, D.C. so that I can do research at the National Archives.
Oh, nice. Well, you'll be living near to where Colonel Holt lives. So,
a lot of other colonels.
Because he lives, he goes into Washington, D.C. quite often.
Okay, great.
Anyway, Tom, we're going to have to say goodbye to you now, and thank you for coming on the show. And anyone out there, thank you for listening, and you've been listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network and Paranormal Dimensions, and I'm David Young, and goodbye Tom. Thank you for coming on. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Colonel Charles Holt is returning to Woodbridge on the 8th of September 2019. It's a Sunday. Tickets are £20 for an all-day UFO event with other great speakers. If you'd like tickets, please get in touch with me. This is my email address. It's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. It's going to be a great event, and there's a few tickets left, but they are going quickly, so you need to act fast. Thank you. Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.